As I told you last week, I've got more questions for you this week than I did last week. I've added some questions, so I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit, but we're technically here to talk about the game, so I wanted to get your thoughts on the Bengals-Lions game here, and we can even focus on the kicking part of it. There weren't too many big kicking moments, but I do want to talk about kicking and punting since you said you've worked with Jack Fox, too.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, the only thing that really stood out, performance-wise, the Bengals didn't really get to do a whole lot. But I think Evan McPherson had a 52-yarder that was good. And then, I don't think Jake. I might have missed some of the game because I was up and down. But Jake did well, and Jack did well.
Yeah, I was hoping that somebody, because both those guys have really good legs, I was hoping that there would be a long field goal attempt that we could discuss. Jake had a long one, I think, a week or two ago. I can't remember which game that was in, but he had an attempt that would have been a record-setting attempt, and you could tell he really wanted that. I get really anxious when they're in field position to be able to do that. That's all I start rooting for, is just for them to it's like a reverse thing. It's like usually a fan would be like, oh no, go down the field. I'm like, no, this is perfect. He can kick like a 70-yarder and he can make it from here. If it's like the end of the half and they're running out of time, I just want them to take a 70-yarder with Jake.
Well, as things go in Lion fandom, it's going to be the other team that does that.
I know. We previewed the Ravens game with a couple folks, including Javen Hunter, who used to play for the Ravens, and we were talking about that Justin Tucker kick because that was 2 times ago, and then the last game they got blown out. Thankfully, they won against them this year, but yeah, that was 2 games ago where that Tucker kick ended the game. But I'm waiting for Jake to be able to do that because I think he's got the leg strength, and I think he really wants to do it too. You can tell he's chomping at the bit to get out there and kick a long game winner like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, definitely has the leg. I thought there might have been a chance possibly before the half, but, I definitely see it's something that he's going to get the opportunity. I don't see, and unless it's a super tight game and field positions really at play, there's sometimes Dan likes to go for it every now and then. But I could see him getting the opportunity when the time comes.
Well, that's one of the things that I really do like the kicking game. That's one of the reasons I was really excited to have you on. And it's a part that I think there's a lot of nuance to that people don't really understand. And between the 2 kickers, the kicker and the punter that the Lions have, I mean, that's one of the best combos that they've had. They've been fortunate. They've had Jason Hansen, and then they had Eddie Murray before him. They've had some good kickers even when the team wasn't so good. They had Prater for a while too. Unfortunately, didn't have you on the squad, but they've had some good kickers, but this kicking punting combo, it's kind of conducive to, if you are in the field position where you can take a long field goal, you're going to kind of lean into that because I think that's why Dan started going for it. I know that there's a lot made about his level of aggression with the calls, but I don't know this is a good question to ask you. I don't know your take with some of the previous kickers that have been on the team, but I think he started that because he just didn't have confidence in sending out that field goal unit. And now he does, clearly, because Jake's great. He's still aggressive, but there's definitely some times now that he sends out that field goal unit knowing that he has a lot of confidence in Jake, in the combination of, okay, if it's basically like, I don't know, the 30, 40 yard line and up, I'm probably going to go for it. If it's intermediate, then I'm going to let Jake kick because he's got the leg to 65, 70. And then if it's further than that, then Jack's going to flip the field. And that's a nice position to have. There's a lot to be said for the special teams changing the game in that sense. For sure, yeah. And, and you've got to look at the way that people use analytics these days. And then in the analytics type of calculation,
last year we had, a depleted, injury-ridden defense. We had, not just the way the analytics change because of how your defense may or may not be, but also that emotional part of it and the situational part of it. And, hindsight's always 20/20. If you get that first down or you get the touchdown, you're a genius. And everyone talks about, carrying your manhood in on a wheelbarrow into the locker room the next day. But, when you don't get it, everyone second guesses you and all of that. So it's always tricky. As a player, I always wanted to kick the field goal. And that was my mindset, was if I'm expecting to kick the field goal no matter what, then I'm prepared. I never wanted, and this is, take this for what you will, but this is a psychology thing. If I was always prepared and wanting to kick the field goal, I wanted my shot. That meant on third down, sometimes I was preparing for the field goal, not cheering for a first down. And it doesn't mean I was being selfish. It means I was being prepared so that I was always ready for that next play to be my call. And I think that's what, all kickers have to be like is I'm next. And I had to learn to not get disappointed when they went for it. So I could never show my emotion because I actually had to stay locked in just in case they called a timeout right before they snapped it, or just in case the head coach decided, you know what, screw it, let's kick it, let's not go for it. I never let myself get emotional in those situations. And even when you don't get the first down, you can't show your emotion or disappointment because you never know when the camera's going to be on you. And if the camera sees you showing disappointment in the coach's decision making and you don't get that first down and you have this look on your face like you knew better or the coach screwed up or whatever, then all of a sudden if you ever come up imperfect, then that's going to come back to bite you. So, that's the thing that I think kickers have to really be careful is how they react when they don't get the call, but also staying kind of level-headed and not letting themselves get too high or low in that situation.
That's an interesting tidbit into the mind of a kicker there. I totally understand everything that you're saying there because you've got to be ready to take the kick at any time and you've got to want it because you can't shy away from it. Of course, you always want your offense to be successful, but you've got to want to have your feature part in the offense because if you don't have that mindset, then you're more likely to fail probably on the back end. And I feel like Jake Bates learned the camera thing the hard way last year when he was doing that stretching bit on the sideline. You probably knew what he was doing, but everybody else was like, is he okay? Does he need help?
Yeah, and part of that is, having your routines, having the things you do that keep you loose, keep you ready, keep you in that this is no different than practice. So if I go a good bit during practice without a lot of movement, I've got to keep myself loose and ready to go. And it's not just kicking in the net the whole time, because if you just kick in the net the whole game, you wear your leg out, because there is a virtual or a figurative pitch count that you need to keep, that you are always trying to manage the reserves you have in your tank. And if you're just kicking the whole game in the net, then you're going to start depleting your reserves, and all of a sudden your leg is fatigued by the end of the game, and all of a sudden you think you've got to swing harder to get the same results. And it's having good game management, but also understanding, who cares what people think because you're doing something different on the sideline. If you're just preparing for your moment, I can promise you, I would move the net in between quarters so that my net was always exactly where I wanted it. I wanted it behind the play so that when I was kicking into it, I had to look all the way down the field, that I would be behind the offense, looking in the direction of the offense, so that I would then on third down start walking down the sideline and I could make eye contact with the head coach or the coordinator, so that if they did not get the first down, I was ready to go right in. Or if the coach wanted to look at me and we had hand signals for what yard line I needed to get the ball to so that I would be comfortable to kick the field goal, those routines where I would carry that net from one end to the next, you think the fans didn't give me crap for that? Absolutely. But my mindset was always, if you don't pay my bills, I don't care what your opinion is, and it has zero effect on what I'm doing, so they could say all they wanted. So it's really just a matter of staying in your focus lane and being zoned into what you're doing and what you can control.
That's a good mindset because they're just sitting there and they don't have that skill set or knowledge, which is part of the reason I wanted to talk about all this stuff. It brings to mind though, I get the visualization part of that, but I was looking recently, I follow the sports memorabilia world because that's kind of my background, and I see at one of the local places here in Michigan, DC Sports, they're having the full battery. They're having Hogan Hatton, Fox, and Bates all signed together, and it made me think, okay, I've got to talk to Shayne about this because I think there's a lot of nuance to the whole long snapping thing and then the holding thing. So I was just wondering about your take on kind of the battery and the process, because obviously you had to have that process be perfect. So I'm curious how you guys practiced that piece of it, and if there's nuance that as fans we don't understand with, and I'm sure there is a lot of that, but with, hey, we need to have it a little different, or maybe there's ball placement differences, things like that. I'm wondering if you can kind of illuminate that process for the lay fan like myself.
Well, all three of us had our own individual skill, and that's another reason why you have to kind of realize why everyone thinks, oh, you can kick, you can punt. Well, maybe in high school, maybe even in some colleges, but there's a reason why you have a punter and you have a kicker. It is two skills that are one of the 32 best in the world on any Sunday, and you can't necessarily do both skills on one leg when it's two different skill sets, swing paths, all body positioning, all that stuff, and the fatigue and wear and tear on one leg. But you all have your own routines. You all have your own way of studying your own film, all of that. And the thing that I always found, when you have a tight specialist room, like a core group of guys, like what we call the room is, the meeting room where we watch our film together. It's us three and the special teams coordinator, usually the assistant, whoever else is a part of that. We learn each other's intricacies. We learn each other's concepts. We learn each other's, study habits. We learn the little things we're looking for to critique ourselves, so we can kind of coach each other when we see things that are out of line. And part of that comes with actually being good friends and being able to understand, if we're going to point out things for each other, we're not trying to beat each other down. We're trying to constructively build each other up. So you have to have a good chemistry, and I think that's why you always kind of have that core group of guys always kind of hanging out together. It's the same thing with the receivers and the DBs and the quarterbacks. They all have their own little, nuances within their rooms. But I think, that's another reason why I wasn't a long snapper, but I can coach it and I can train it. I wasn't, quote unquote, a punter, but I can coach it and I can train it because I was around for 15 years, the best in the world to do it. And I would listen to what they talked about and what they would critique themselves. So it's a kind of a cool dynamic, but when you're out on the field and you're working on certain things, like you understand if it's wet out, if it's snowing, if it's whatever kind of weather and things you're dealing with, you understand there's going to be a timing issue with the snow and your foot traction on the ground and all of those things. It's going to slow things down just a hair. If you're dealing with, a new guy, you got to learn that new guy. Like if the punter gets hurt and they bring in somebody else the next week, or you've got a backup quarterback or somebody potentially holding for you, you have to understand how they're going to fit into that mix and also not let it affect your confidence. And it's the same thing that happens with a long snapper. You've always got to have a guy, maybe it's a tight end or a linebacker, someone who has the body type to fill that space, but also the athletic ability to snap the ball perfectly or as close to perfect as they can. And that's where you give that guy a few reps during the week so they can kind of be prepared for it, because we saw it happen to Cincinnati a few years ago. They had their long snapper get hurt, and it cost them a game because they didn't have a guy that they felt could quite do it perfectly. Even though he didn't do bad, it still threw off the operation a little bit, and it caused some issues. And I've seen it happen time and time again. But it's all of the guys have to be on the same page, and that's knowing exactly what the kicker wants with the hold, and the kicker knowing that he can start his approach to the ball at the exact same time every single time. The kicker usually starts their approach to the ball as the holder is lifting his hand off the ground where he's holding the spot down. He'll lift his hand up to catch the ball, and that's what the kicker's typically focused on to know when to start. And it's just those guys always being on the same page.
Interesting. Yeah, that's why they're called specialists, because it is a special skill, all three of those things, and they have three good ones in Detroit there. So that's interesting stuff. Yeah. We gotta take a quick break, but I want to go into some of the things that you mentioned last week. I think we're going to come out of the break and talk about how you pack your bag as a kicker, because that kind of was an interesting thing to me last week. So we'll come back with Shayne Graham, a former Pro Bowl kicker, after the break. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Shayne Graham. More great stuff from him. I'm really enjoying the conversation. You mentioned this last week, Shayne, and it piqued my curiosity here. So I'm curious, you said you teach your students and trainees how to pack their bag as a kicker. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. Is there like a speed based element? I imagine it being like the combine, and then you make them go fast and then close it up.
So, really the way it works is understanding the situation you're on. If you are just traveling and you're going to go somewhere and kick, I always wanted to make sure that, I had my kicking shoe, I had all my equipment. That's simple. That's easy. When you were getting a workout with a team where you might win a job because the team is looking to sign a new guy, I would always make sure, one, I always had, when I was a free agent on the street and I was not on the team, I always made sure I had a carry-on bag packed and loaded in my car at all times, because you never know when you get that call, and you never know when you got to go right to the airport. And I've actually had that happen during my career, where I got a call, and had I had to have gone home and packed a bag or grabbed a bag, I would have missed the window to be able to make that team charter for that away game. So it worked out perfectly for me because I was prepared. But even at that, I always made sure I had my kicking shoe. I had a backup for it, one that was there just in case my shoelace busted, a seam busted, something. You never know. I don't care if my shoe was brand new. I always had a backup for it, and they were always broken in at the same level so that they felt the same on my foot. Then I had my plant shoes. I would have a firm ground shoe for nice, tight grass, short grass. I would have a shoe that was for soft, wet, sloppy ground or snow or whatever. And then I would have a shoe that was for really tight turf. Back in the day, we actually used to play on AstroTurf, so I always had one for that as well. But having all of those things in my carry-on, so I never had to worry about luggage getting lost, in transport or anything like that. My kicking tees, my, the little holder device, the self-holder that we use when we're kicking by ourselves. I always wanted to make sure I had that in my carry-on so that I never had to worry about if I got somewhere and I had to warm up, the other kickers weren't looking to not have one of those as well. And you don't rely on the team that you're going to have one ready for all of you, because I didn't want to share. I've got my routine. I'm taking care of myself. I'm sorry, buddy, you should have brought one. But things like that, but also when you pack your bag for a game, when you're on a team, you make sure you've got your backup shoe, your regular shoe, an extra pair of shoelaces just in case, your plant shoe, all of the equipment. You never trust anyone else with it, because you never want it to feel like I'm hoping my equipment managers don't lose something. Not that they would, but never ever put your faith in someone else. Keep all the control you can keep. I always made sure I had, the proper socks, everything, so that I never got caught in a situation where I felt like my confidence was wavering because I was worried about something being missing or whatever. And that's just something that I make sure my guys understand, even to packing, recovery compression tights, so that if you're flying on the airplane, you're keeping the lactic acid from building up in your calves or your feet or in your legs in general. I would wear that underneath my suit when I traveled so that my legs were not having lactic acid buildup on the plane. And anything I could think of that kept me ahead of the curve, I was trying to stay ahead of it. And I can promise you, sometimes I learned the lesson really young, and sometimes I figured it out before I had to learn the lesson. But that's a lot of what I like to try to pass on to my guys, so they realize this is not just about being good at your craft. It's about being prepared and never getting caught off guard as well.
I love all of that. That was a very fascinating explanation of that, and you can tell the wealth of knowledge you have. I'm curious. I was looking at your website because I want to make sure we talk about the school a little bit, and I saw on there that you created the Elite Rating Index. So I'm curious about that and how you use that for your school and your students.
Okay, so originally I designed it and came up with the idea when I saw the kind of data that the TrackMan radar device can gather from kicks. You used to see it on the screen during, I think it was the Thursday night primetime games, where when someone would kick a field goal, it would tell you this kick would have been good from this distance, because it analyzed the data in real time and literally told you, like, how far would this kick have made it from. And that was really kind of the only thing they put on there. It might give you the height at the line of scrimmage, but what it gives you is this full spreadsheet on every kick that tells you the rate of spin on the ball. It tells you the lateral movement. It tells you the apex. It tells you the ball velocity, ball speed, how far would it have been good from, all of those things. And it gives you a huge data set. So what I did is, in the kicking world, there's these camps that are out there, and I'm not going to mention who all they are, but they all have these ranking systems, and they give you like these stars. I'm a 4-star kicker. I'm a 4.5-star kicker. Well, that was all an adaptation of basically this 247 and some of these other recruiting, sports companies that created a way to tell who were the really high-ranked recruits. And, you'd have maybe 4, 5, or 6 5-star quarterbacks. And those were the guys that had the offers from everybody, Alabama, Georgia, all the schools. And then you had the 4 stars, and those were the guys who had a lot of offers, but not the most offers. And then you had kind of the average run-of-the-mill 3 stars, which was everybody who could probably play in Division I football. Well, the kicking world didn't quite have an equivalent of that, because kickers don't get offers at the same click as super high-ranked recruits like quarterbacks do. So, I had about 25 Division I scholarship offers coming out of high school, and I was probably, a 3-star. I don't know exactly what. That was so long ago, I have no idea. But in today's world, the kickers now have a separate system that some of these camps that have been developed over the years that really don't necessarily teach a ton. They just do a lot of ranking, and these kids all use it because they think it is the gold standard for recruiting. Well, in actuality, you're wasting a lot of money by going to all these camps to get your ranking and get your score and get your star ranking up, because if you have the highest level of stars and the number 1 ranked guy in the world, if you go kick in front of that head coach at their camp over the summer and you're not the best guy, you're not getting the offer. So all of that effort you put into going to these ranking camps, and I'll also say, you go to these camps and you think you're competing against these other guys, and you think it's preparing you and you're being a competitor and blah, 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 but when you're a kicker, you do not compete against anyone. Competition is not in the fold. You are competing against yourself. You are executing. That is all you're doing. You are not playing against the other team's kicker. You are not even playing against the other team's defensive line. Your job is to start at a certain time, keep the same tempo, kick the ball the same way every time, put it between the goalposts. You are not competing at all. You are executing. So the mindset of competing against other kids to try to be better, when some kid might see another guy kick the ball further or higher, all of a sudden he's going to start swinging harder, trying to do that. So I just felt like that concept wasn't really good for the skill. So I created a very consistent continuity type test where you kick 5-6 balls on the TrackMan from various spots. Everyone kicks from the same spot. And you take the data, and I created a comparative analysis and a scale that said, if I get this speed, this is how it compares to a typical NFL prospect type college kicker. So if I'm trying to get into college, how do I compare to the top college kicker? And you get a score like a Madden score. I never use the word Madden score because I don't have a trademark on it, but it's kind of like that. You know, you get like a power ranking for your power. You get a ranking for your accuracy. You get a ranking for your consistency, and you get a ranking for height at the line of scrimmage, because those are all kind of the things that all the NFL coaches I talked to said mattered the most to them. And I created a scale. And it was something that it's actually about to start taking off even more, because I've got a bunch of partners around the country that are also kicking coaches that are all buying into it, because they understand that the objective data scale is way better than just getting percentages of making kicks. Because you can have guys that do not kick a high-quality ball as far as the height, the rotation, the look of the kick, but they go through sometimes, right? So somebody can go 15 of 15. It's not going to be the same as somebody who might go 15 of 15 but hit every ball perfect. So it's an objective way to make that measurement. So it became something that I'm using with other coaches, and it's about to get bigger because I kind of slowed down with it. But it's about to get bigger because that score is going to be able to be to hundredths of a decimal, so that you can actually create a true hierarchy of who gets the highest score and who consistently can be the better guy. So that's what it became, as an objective scoring, using hardcore radar detected data that's derived from missile tracking military technology.
That's interesting, because there was clearly a need for standardization there, and you saw that and then solved that problem, and now it's catching on. That's pretty cool. I like that description, and we've got to get you out of here. I'd love to talk with you more. Hopefully we'll get you back on at some point in time, because I still have more questions, but I want to make sure to promote the school, and then hopefully maybe at some point later in the season we can get an update for you on how everything's going with you, and on any kicking happenings, and have another interview. But tell people about the school, because clearly you are one of the leading folks in the kicking industry here. So I want to make sure we get the details out on that.
Well, it's elitewinningsolutions.com. And you can go also to my social media. I think it's Shayne _Graham, SHAYNE _Graham, GRAHAM. That's my Instagram, and it's EWS_mentality for my business. And then it's Shayne Graham 17 is my X or Twitter or whatever you call it. Both of them kind of give updates and give you registration forms and all that kind of stuff. But if you just go to elitewinningsolutions.com, navigate through the site, you can find how you can buy bulk packaging for discounts. You can find, my group sessions, come first time's free. You can even buy, multiple private lessons and get buy 4, get 1 free type thing. And then see the other services, the mental performance side of it, the weight room education on how to actually train in the weight room as a kicker, not just as a generic football player, and film review, all that stuff. It's all a part of the services. And, it's trying to bring a lot more detail and specificity with the actual situations that you're going to be in as a kicker through the experience that I learned over my 20, 30, however many years I kicked the football competitively.
That's great. That's all great stuff. And I that was actually one of the questions that I had that I still didn't get to was the weight room equipment. So we'll have to cover that the next time. But hopefully we can have you back on again because it's fascinating stuff. And I got a lot of good feedback from both these interviews because I think we shed a lot of light on a subject that has been a little bit not covered enough from different people here. So I really appreciate you joining the show for this series, and hopefully we can have you back on again soon here, Shayne.
Have me back regular. Have me back whenever. It's all good. I enjoy it.
Regular sounds good to me. We'll have you back soon, and we'll talk to you about we'll get the updates on the kicking over the course of the season. I like that as an idea, and I still have questions left. So thanks for joining us, Shayne. Check out his school, and we'll talk to you soon here.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Shayne. Take care. Thanks to Shayne Graham. Appreciate him joining us here for back-to-back weeks. It's fascinating stuff. I really do have more questions. We didn't even talk about his coaching, and who knew they had a go bag like my old intelligence days. He has a go bag for different reasons.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall, DDS, Calder Financial Group, Grand Management, Rydan Investments, JH Realty Partners, and Encore Business Group. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.